So, today we're going to be talking about the anti-communist crusade and the Red Scare occurring in this post-war era. This will take part of Truman's administration, but it'll also go into the 1950s as well. So just know this is just the opinions of American society in general. It's not just for Truman specifically. It's really Truman through and Eisenhower throughout the 1950s, but it begins in Truman's era. The anti-communist crusade is also known as the Red Scare. Now, I feel like we've had another Red Scare before. When was the last Red Scare? When was the Red Scare previously? When was the first Red Scare? It was after what? After World War I. And so the first Red Scare was after World War I, and that Red Scare was a fear of what? Communism. And so you have a second Red Scare after World War II, which is also a fear of communism. So you should be able to draw the parallels between World War I and World War II. The fear of communism following both generations. Okay, so why are we afraid of communism? I mean, is it just because we're being ridiculous, or is there a good reason? Well, there is some reasons why this fear of communism is being promoted at this time, because there is, in fact, a great deal of paranoia. What is paranoia? And it's like an irrational fear, right? Paranoia is irrational fear, or just fear in general. But there is a fear of communism, a paranoia of communism, and we have good reason to believe this, have this paranoia. One of the major reasons we have paranoia is there's a fear that there is communism in America. There's a fear that communism has infiltrated America, or that communism is in America. Communism has infiltrated America, or communism is in America. How do we know that communism is in America? What evidence did we have that proves that there must be communists in America? And what form do those communists take in America? They're probably communist what? Communist spies. So there is a fear that there are communist spies in America. And again, how do we know that there are communist spies in America? Julian? Yeah, the Russians made a bomb sooner than we expected. So again, we know that there are communist spies in America. That scares the crap out of us, because do we know who these communist spies are? No, they look just like us. That's the problem. The second reason why there is this Red Scare is that not only are the communists, infiltrating America, but the communists can also destroy us, because the communists now have what? Nuclear weapons. So now the communists have nuclear weapons. There's a fear of nuclear war. There's a fear that the Soviets have a nuclear weapon and they're going to kill us all. So that's another fear promoting this Red Scare, that the communists want to kill us all with nuclear weapons. There's also fear of communism spreading. And is communism spreading across the world? Give me evidence of where communism has spread across the world. Brittany, give me one. China is one. Who can give me another? Where else did communism take hold in this era that we previously talked about? Carla? East Berlin. Yeah, East Berlin, sure. Where else? Julian? Carissa? North Korea. And also not just East Berlin, but just East what? Eastern Europe. Eastern Germany, Eastern Europe. So you have Eastern Europe, you have North Korea, you have China, and many of these people feel like are the Soviets, setting the stage for the spread of communism in America. There's a fear that we're being surrounded and that we might become communists in the future, and that's scary as hell. And so we're afraid that communism might be spreading. There's also a fear of another depression. And why might this fear of another depression create a Red Scare? If there's another depression, what is the fear? Zaneri? That communists can take over America when we've weakened, when people are angry, and so there's a fear that another Great Depression might lead to communism. If the government fails us again, the communists are going to take over. So there is that fear of communism spreading. And lastly, fear in the media, or fear promoted by the media. Fear promoted by the media. Fear promoted by the media. That's also promoting communism at this time. Fear promoted by the media. Examples that I have are movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. A movie that came out at the time of the 1950s was Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now, why might a movie like Invasion of the Body Snatchers create fear of communism? Well, the movie was about aliens taking over human bodies, but still looking like humans. So why is there a fear of communism being promoted there? Because the aliens represented who? The Russians. And that these communists were infiltrating our neighborhoods looking like us, but really, they were communists. So again, we're using aliens to project our fears of communism. Another movie like The Blob. The Blob is supposed to represent what? That communism was what? Spreading. It was a blob, emerging, and we couldn't stop it across America. That fear is being promoted through communism. Okay, the Blob was the spread of communism. And then another movie called They, just They. The fear of the other, the fear of the unknown. And so the media is portraying this sense of fear. The media is portraying this sense of communism. They make the same argument today about zombies. They say that zombies can represent the hordes of disease that America is afraid about today. They say zombies could represent, how American people, are just like following the same thing. They don't think for themselves. How zombies are supposed to be an allegory for the American people somehow. How we're brainless and we just do whatever we like, or we're carnal and we never think anymore, or whatever. And so these movies that promote fear, they're supposed to project the fears of American people. What are we actually afraid of? When all those Saw movies came out, maybe the argument was that there's a fear that we might be captured by terrorists and be tortured to death. That is our fear, that there are people out there trying to get us. And so the Red Scare kind of promotes this fear throughout American society, and we'll kind of see how we respond to those fears, okay? But this is why fear exists at this time. Well, one way that the government responded to this fear was through the Smith Act of 1940. The government responded to fear through the Smith Act of 1940. And what the Smith Act of 1940 did was that it made it illegal to promote the overthrow of the government. It made it illegal to promote the overthrow of the government. Before, because of freedom of speech, could you go around and saying, yeah, we should totally overthrow the U.S. government? Yeah, you could say that because of freedom of speech. But now, could that become more of a reality? Might there be people that actively really want to do that and have the resources? Sure. So they made it illegal to promote the overthrow of the government. They also said that you could not be a member of the Communist Party. You could not be a member of the Communist Party because most communist parties were promoting the overthrow of the U.S. government. Now, we're all communist parties promoting the end of the U.S. government. Now, there are peaceful communists. They're like, what, America would be better under communism. Let's vote it into power. But there were others that believed that through military intervention, America should be overthrown. So they said you may not be a member of the Communist Party. And so this is how they tried to, make people feel better about, communism. That we're going to make sure that it is illegal to overthrow the government. Now, do you think this made people feel better or worse about communism? Worse. Here's why. Because now they're saying, hey, there are communists everywhere, don't be a part of it. They're like, wait, what, there are communists here? Think about it, folks. If the government came into La Puente today and said, hey, we're here looking for terrorists, you'd be like, what, terrorists? Would you now believe that there are terrorists in America? Sure. But if they said nothing, you would be fine. And so actually the irony of all of this is that while it is promoting, security, it did create more fear of communism. So our attempts to promote security also create fear. They also create fear. Another organization created by Congress, is WHAC, or the House Un-American Activities Committee. The House Un-American Activities Committee. And WHAC's job was to root out communism, or to investigate communism. Their job was to investigate communism, which included investigating American citizens. They began to investigate American citizens. And many people said, when they began to investigate American citizens by reading their mail, listening to their phone calls, people thought that this was a violation of what? Huh? Privacy. It was a violation of their privacy. It's a violation of their Bill of Rights. But they said, look, we're looking for communism. We're looking for un-American activities. And we have to look for these because the communists are a threat. And so what WHAC did was it promoted sensationalist fears. Sensationalist fears. They asked them, if you suspect your neighbor of being a communist, call the police. And then we'll find out. You know, like, if you think your neighbor is a communist, then call the police and they'll listen to their phone calls, read their mail, and they'll find out they're a communist or not. Now, would you like that to happen to you? Probably wouldn't like that. Too bad, it's happening today. Same laws can't apply today, folks. Patriot Act. And so the basic idea is if you are suspected to be trying to overthrow the government can get a warrant to read your emails, listen to your phone calls, tap your wireless, tap your phones, see what you're doing online, to see if you are, in fact, a terrorist or a threat to the U.S. government. And they can do that if you are suspected. This was a lot more fearsome, though. This was a lot more fear-based and actually fact-based. But again, did this create more or less fear? More fear, because now it's asking people to spy on their neighbors. They encouraged Americans to spy on their neighbors. Make sure your neighbor's not a communist. They might be. And if they are, let us know and we'll look into it. But encourage spying on neighbors. And that's going to create more fear in America at this time. Here they are, spying on neighbors, listening in their conversations, trying to see if they're being communist or not. And they're probably not doing anything illegal, but the basic idea is, you know what, we might as well look into everything because who knows? These people might be communists. Truman felt that he had to do something also, so Truman created his loyalty program. What Truman did was he created something called the Loyalty Review Board. The Loyalty Review Board. And what the Loyalty Review Board did was that it investigated 3 million Americans that were part of what? Specifically, who is he investigating? 3 million Americans that were what? Not Russian. Come on, folks, the Loyalty Review Board. Some of you guys did your homework. What was Truman investigating? He was investigating 3 million people where? Or 3 million people that were doing what? Use the clues, folks. 3 million federal employees. 3 million government employees. The idea was we were going to investigate 3 million federal or government employees to see if they were communists. Because if there were communists in the government, would that be bad? That would be very bad to have communists in the government. So he investigated over 3 million federal employees to make sure they were not communists. Because if they were, that would not be a good thing. And so here's what the Loyalty Review Board did. Number one, it investigated them. So that's pretty simple. The first thing that it did, it investigated employees, 3 million of them. Number two, it required loyalty oaths, saying that you were not what? You were not a communist. Again, I have to take that. Number three, it forbade employees to do the following. It also forbid employees to, and here's a list of 4 things that they were not allowed to do. It forbid employees to criticize U.S. foreign policy. So you can't criticize U.S. foreign policy, even if you don't agree. So you can criticize U.S. foreign policy. 2, promote equal rights for women, because that's communism. At the time it was. They're like, oh, I see what you're doing there, that's communism. So promote equal rights for women, not now, not ever. Remember, women already had the right to vote, so they say any attempt towards equality must be communism. Number 3, own socialist books or communist books. You may not own socialist or communist books. And lastly, watch foreign films. You're not allowed to watch foreign films because you might get the wrong ideas. It might be a foreign film promoting communism, and all of a sudden, you're communist. So they don't like that. You want to make sure that you stay a true American. Well, ultimately, over 3,000 resigned due to the investigations. Many thought that it was just an intrusion of privacy. Others maybe were actually communists. Over 3,000 resigned. And so, did this increase or decrease Americans' fear of communism? Increase. Think about it. Oh my God, he investigated 3 million and 3,000 resigned or were dismissed? What if those were the only ones that were obvious? Who knows how many communists we didn't catch? So will that increase the fears of communism? Sure. So again, there's that going on. But again, are they trying to make people feel better? And in trying to make people feel more secure, they're making people feel worse. I guess the same thing today, right? Like, oh, we'll put more security at the airports, but the more security at the airports makes you feel like, oh, wow, we doubled security, don't worry. Why are you doubling security? Is it a higher threat of terrorism this week? Right? I mean, wouldn't you think the same thing? Like, oh, we have 9 checkpoints now. Why is there 9 checkpoints? Is it 9 times more likely for there to be a terrorist attack? Is that why? Why are you taking our bags? Oh, wait, are there bombs in bags now? Why do we have to take off our shoes? Are there shoe bombs now? I mean, again, it creates fear. And the one guy, I'm not going to do this. It's because you're a terrorist. He's a terrorist. I mean, same thing back then. I'm not gonna go through this review board. That's ridiculous. That's an invasion of my privacy. What do you have to hide? Are you a communist? Same idea. Same idea still being promoted back then. Same idea being promoted today. Then you have the McCarran Internal Security Bill. The McCarran Internal Security Bill. What this required was that communist organizations were required to register with the government. So communist organizations were required to register with the government so we could track them. So communist organizations were required to register with the government. Now, the reason why, again, was so we can track them. But other people wanted to create what for communists? As featured here. Concentration camp. We want to put them all in one place. So again, communist organizations were required to register with the government in order for us to track them. Tell me if they'd be willing to do that. What if I said all drug dealers must register with the government from now on? How effective would that be? Not very. But again, that's the same idea. And so you have that going on. But the other thing is that this bill also allowed the president to arrest suspicious persons. It allowed the president to arrest suspicious persons. Just arrest them, no warrant. If they were suspicious, we can arrest them. And that's a problem, folks, because does that take away people's rights? Don't you need evidence to arrest somebody? And a jury and a trial and all that stuff? Well, they say, well, if there's not enough evidence but you're suspicious, we should have the right to arrest you just in case. Now, would you guys like to have that law? Probably not. Guess what? We have that law. Too bad. It was signed 3 years ago, allowing the president to detain anyone indefinitely if they pose a security risk. If they pose security risk. And if we don't know, we'll detain them anyway just in case. Now, let me ask you guys. If you think that someone might be a terrorist or might, kill some people, would you feel better? Even if we didn't have evidence, would you feel better if we arrested them temporarily just until we found evidence? Would that make you feel better? Sure, right? What if you were that person? What if I said, I think that this person might try to kill a lot of people, but there's no evidence, but I feel like, the way they've been talking and joking, I feel like it's not just jokes, I feel like it's serious. So what if they detain you? And until they can find evidence that you're not going to kill all those people, they're going to hold you. Now, how would you like that? Not so much anymore. So it's cool. It's like, oh, well, it could be anybody. It's not going to be me, but it could be you. Because someone who doesn't like you very much, or someone that might not understand you, might all of a sudden think that the jokes that you're making or the statements that you're making are more threat and less joke. And so this could hypothetically happen to you. Well, nonetheless, folks, President Truman felt that this gave him too much power. He was afraid we would become a police state. You can just arrest whoever you want. And so he vetoed this bill. But it was overridden. Truman vetoed the bill, but it was still passed. Truman vetoed the bill, and then it was overridden. So again, more fear. Oh yeah, I also should note, it prevented communists from working in the defense industry. It prevented communists from working in the defense industry. Why don't we want communists working in the defense industry? They might sabotage weapons. What else might they do? Huh? They might give away positions to, like if, we're secretly in X location. That might be a problem. What else might communists do that they already did? They might steal plans. So again, for all these reasons, we did not want communists working in the defense industry. They might be spies, they might steal, they might sabotage. For all those reasons, we don't want communists working in the defense industry. Now, how many communists were actually bad? Like very, very few. They were just communists because they thought, rich people shouldn't be super rich. Poor people should have more. But they said all communists were the same, therefore we passed all these laws. Then this happened. Then we met Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. Who are these people? These people were Soviet spies. And they sold atomic secrets to Soviet spies. Or they sold atomic secrets to the Soviets, which is why they were able to catch up so quickly. And the problem is, when we uncovered these people, that scared the crap out of everyone. Because do they look like communists? No, they're like everyday people. And so the fear was, your neighbor down the street could be a communist and you would never know. And so did this also prove that there were, in fact, communists in America? Yes. And so the mere fact that Ethel and Julius Rosenberg sold atomic secrets to the Soviets, that made them a serious threat. And it made everyone afraid. It made everyone afraid because who knows who's the next communist? It might be the guy down the street. It might be your neighbor. It might be your wife. She might just be pretending to be an American to get closer to you. And then when you least suspect it, she'll steal your briefcase and give the secrets to the Soviets. Who knows what she's trying to do? Who knows what he's trying to do? Your boyfriend, your girlfriend, they too might be a communist. And that was the fear. That was the big fear at the time. They're the only people to be executed for treason during peacetime. They're the only people ever to be executed during peacetime. Abel. They're the only people ever to be executed during peacetime. But they are executed for treason. Sorry, the only people to be executed for treason during peacetime. A lot of people are executed during peacetime. Like all the time. That's just normal. But for treason during peacetime, that's a big deal. Treason again is what? What is treason? What crime is that? What is treason, guys? The highest crime. What is treason? Treason is crime against the government. No, treason is crime against the government. Lying is perjury. You're not going to kill you for that. But treason is when you actively work against the government. They will kill you for that. That is just, you're not allowed to do that. They will kill you. That's the highest crime in this country, guys. Treason, when you actively work against the government. You actively work to subvert the government. So does this scare people? Oh yeah, people are afraid. Then there's blacklisting. What they did was they blacklisted Hollywood directors, actors, writers. They blacklisted Hollywood writers, directors, actors for being friendly with communism. Does that mean that they're communists? No, they're friendly with communism. They might have communist friends, or they might entertain the idea of communism because communism was not allowed, and so communism became cool. You know, like, oh, they can't talk about communism. Oh, let's talk about communism. Come on. Come on, no one has to know. We'll talk about communism. And so communism became a fad. Communism became cool. It became a hip thing to do. And so many of them were friendly with communism, and Congress was not too happy about that. And so Congress went ahead and they arrested a group known as the Hollywood 10. They arrest a group known as the Hollywood 10 for refusing to testify about their communist connections. They arrest a group known as the Hollywood 10 for refusing to testify about their communist connections. They said, I'm not going to talk about who I know in the Communist Party. That's none of your damn business. And so they arrested them for refusing to testify about their communist connections. The Hollywood 10, directors, actors, writers. Eventually, 250 actors, writers, whatever, were blacklisted. A total of 250 were blacklisted, which meant what? If these Hollywood types were blacklisted, what did that mean? They could not what? They could not make movies, they could not write, act, direct in Hollywood anymore. So over 250 people were blacklisted from Hollywood. For a time, this included people like Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, I Love Lucy, who said, there's nothing wrong with communism. You know, what's wrong is our willingness to kill each other, not understand. In any case, you have that going on. So there's a fear like, so the movies that we're watching are brainwashing us? So again, fears, promoting even further. The fear of brainwashing, the fear of Hollywood getting inside your head. Advertising, you know, is that making us more communist? Who knows? And then McCarthyism. McCarthyism scared people too. Here's what happened. McCarthyism was promoted by this guy, Senator Joseph McCarthy. And Senator Joseph McCarthy made a statement that made him very powerful. And what he said was that he knew that there were 205 communists. He knew that there were 205 communists in the State Department. He knew that there were 205 communists hiding in the State Department. Now, if someone comes up to you and says, I know that there are 205 communists in the State Department, what do you want him to do next? What would you want him to do next, now that he knows that there are 205? You want him to find them, right? You want him to root them out, find them. You know the names. Tell us who they are. So he did. But here's the problem. He didn't know where they were. He didn't know for a fact. He lied. And instead, he promoted hysteria, fear, and a witch hunt to gain political power. He created hysteria, fear, and a witch hunt to create or to give himself political power. Because if this man says, I know where the communists are, I know where they're hiding, are you going to trust this guy? Are you going to give him some power to find them? He knows where they are. Quick, give him all the power he needs to find them. I want my children to live another day. And so he says, don't worry, folks, I'll find them. I know they're in there. And so are people going to follow him? Because he says they know where they are. If I said, guys, I know where gold is in Arizona. If you follow me, I will take you to that gold. Will you follow me? Of course you would, because I told you. I said it's so certain. I didn't say, like, guys, there might be gold in Arizona. You want to come? You wouldn't come. Might be? That's good enough for you? No way. But he didn't say, I think there are communists in the State Department. He said, I know. And by saying I know, people are like, oh, there are communists. Truman didn't find them all. Quick, you must find them. The problem is, he made accusations without evidence. There was no evidence whatsoever. He made accusations without evidence, and he made these accusations during secret hearings. What are hearings? Just secret what? Meetings. During secret hearings or secret meetings. So he made these accusations without evidence during secret hearings. And here's how that would look like. Leslie, you're a communist, aren't you? Prove it. Prove to me you're not a communist. Huh? You're not a communist? Are you sure you're not? You're a communist. I know you're a communist. You're just saying, see, you're going to say you're not a communist because that's what communists would say. Yeah, of course you're not a communist. That's exactly what a communist would say. And so, can you get around that? He has no evidence, but he's saying, you're a communist. Oh, you're saying you're not a communist? But that's exactly what I expect a communist would say, that they're not a communist. Oh, you're good. You're good at hiding, but we're going to get you. Admit that you're a communist! Is that evidence? Yelling at someone? But that's what he did. But no one knew that's what he was doing because it was behind closed doors. And the second you came into that room, if people saw you walk into that secret hearing, they automatically assumed what? You must be a communist. If he's investigating you, you must be a communist. It's guilt by association, guys. If you walked into that room, you must be a communist. And so he became popular and he ruined people's careers. He ruined them. Because again, it was guilt by association. If he investigated you, he must have had a reason. He must have had a reason. He's not going to go in and just yell at you. That's crazy. But no one knew what he was doing. And so he scared the crap out of people. He even accused the Democratic Party of all being communist because of the New Deal. So he made all these wild accusations. Said everyone was a communist. If you're not a Democrat, if you're not on my side, if you're not a Republican, you're a communist. And so people were scared. His downfall. Here's where maybe he got in his head that he was too powerful. Oh, one other thing. If he said that you were a communist, he'd also say you're a homosexual. And that was like, you're not only a communist, you're a homosexual. And that's not good for America either. And so then that would be, oh my gosh, in 1950s, it's a very different time than America today. That ruined you. And so if you're not the communist, then you're a homosexual. If you're a homosexual, you're also a communist. It was a strange thing that he was accused people of. In any case, his downfall. It got to his head because did he seem very powerful now? Did he feel like nobody could stop me? The American people have my back. I will find the communists. And so he got greedy. He got overzealous. And he said, or he decided, he would accuse the army of harboring communists. He was going to accuse the army of having communists. Because again, no one was willing to oppose him. If they said, McCarthy, you're crazy, what are you talking about? He was like, aha, you're a communist. You don't want me to continue these hearings, do you? Because I'm going to find all your friends out. You must be a communist too. That's a problem. So he decides to accuse the army of communism, of hiding communists. But he gets so bold and so confident, he decides to televise the hearings. He's going to put them on TV and show the world that there are communists in the army. Now, here's why he got so confident. I mean, yes, he was accusing people with no evidence at all. But if you're accusing all these people, might you get a few right? Yeah. Like, I might accuse all of you of being communists, and maybe all of you aren't. But Cordell might be. So if I get that one right, I mean, do I look good? I look pretty good. Like, you see, and I say, you see, I have evidence. And this is just one of many pieces of evidence for everyone else. But I have to show evidence for you guys. I have to show that I got one guy. And I'll just assume that everyone else also had evidence. They were just really good at hiding it. Okay? And so he televises it. And everyone watches. They're like, oh, McCarthy's going to get him. I want to watch. Oh, let's see with the army. And he just gets on there. He starts yelling again. And you're like, wait, what? But where's the evidence? I thought he said he knew. Does he know anything? He's just yelling at them. Saying, you're a communist, aren't you? Tell me you're a communist. And the army said, you must be out of your damn mind. Do you have any evidence at all, accusing us of communism? Like, I don't need evidence. I know you're communists. Not good. The rest of the Senate finds out that this is how those hearings are going. And as a result, the Senate decides to censure and then condemn McCarthy, thus kicking him out of the Senate and ending McCarthyism. I should note that McCarthyism lasted from 1950 to 1954. So during that time, were people just scared out of their minds that communists were everywhere? Sure. But eventually, they censure and then condemn McCarthy, kicking him out of the Senate. He dies 3 years later of alcoholism. I mean, he was ruined. There's no way he's going to run for office again. So McCarthy dies. And here he is. Fake photo, fake letter. And this was his evidence during the hearing. Stuff that was clearly not real. He brought some evidence, but we all knew that it was fake. And so McCarthy loses. And yeah, that's the end of McCarthyism. But again, did it create a lot of fear here? Most definitely. All right, this brings us lastly to the election of 1948. In this election, the Republicans nominate Thomas Dewey. And the Republicans are kind of sick of the Democrats. They feel like, let's elect a guy that might be able to win this year. So they nominate Thomas Dewey. They also, the Dixiecrats, they nominate Strom Thurmond. Now, the Dixiecrats are Southern conservative Democrats. And their big platform, we'll talk about on Wednesday. So we'll talk about the election 1948 later. If you guys didn't complete your essay, make sure you guys get that done soon. So last time we met, folks, we were talking about McCarthyism and how kind of things were getting bad. Did we talk about the downfall of McCarthyism? So we talked about the downfall of McCarthyism. If I remember, we were just getting into the election of 1948. Is that correct? All right. So before we get to that, I do want to show you guys a quick clip called How to Spot a Communist. So the basic idea here is that, again, there's a fear that communists are out there. So here's a quick documentary film kind of showing Americans, how do you know if your neighbor's a communist? So here's one film doing that.
Propaganda is vastly more important in democratic societies. Recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in communist publications, he may be a communist. If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist. If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist. If a person does all these things over a period of time, he must be a communist.
So again, not the best way to explain what a communist is. But again, if it walks like a communist, talks like a communist, sounds like a communist, then it must be a communist. Okay, that's the basic idea. And so, if you suspect your friends, it's okay to be suspicious, but if they're doing it over and over again, they must be a communist, even without evidence, because they're probably hiding the fact that they're a communist. In any case, folks, that's the fear being promoted, and this brings us to the election of 1948. In the election of 1948, the Republicans nominate Thomas Dewey, and the Dixiecrat Party is a breakaway from the Democratic Party. The Dixiecrat Party breaks away from the Democratic Party, and this is a group of Southern states' writers. It's a group of Southern states' writers. It's a group of conservative Southern states that believe in states' rights. So they're Southern states' writers. They believe in states' rights. And they are anti-civil rights for blacks. They're anti-civil rights for blacks. So the whole point that Truman was trying to desegregate the Army and the Navy, they didn't like that so much. So again, they are states' writers. They're for states' rights. And they're anti-civil rights for blacks. So pretty much they break away from the Democratic Party, and they created their own party with the foundation of racism at its core. And they created their own political party here. And then on the other hand, you have the Democrats nominate Harry Truman. So the Democrats nominate, Dixiecrats nominate Strom Thurmond. He is a racist, I would say. And then the Democrats nominate Harry Truman. So which party gets split here? The Democratic Party. So in those situations, do you expect that the Republicans will win? When a party is split, you expect that likely the opposing party that's not split will win this election. Well, when we look at the results, who wins? Truman wins his second term. Now, interestingly enough, everyone assumed that Truman was going to lose, because the logic goes, if your party's split, you probably won't win. But when we looked at the numbers, that wasn't the case. And the funny thing is that newspapers across the country already assumed that Dewey was going to win. So they already printed newspapers saying that Dewey defeats Truman. And at the end of the day, when the votes were finally counted, they're like, oh, we were wrong. Whoops. And they had to shred all those newspapers. But before Truman, because again, in the morning they throw all the newspapers, like 3 o'clock in the morning, just to make sure they're all available. Truman goes out, he grabs the newspaper, you see, this is why you bet on Truman. You don't bet on Dewey, because Truman always wins. And so it's one of those very historic photos where the media and the public got it wrong, and really Truman wins the presidency, despite everyone assuming that he was going to lose. That's just like how everyone assumed, oh, it's going to be a close election between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. And then at 8 o'clock, the election's over. You're like, wait, what? I thought this was going to be the most tight race in the last 12 years. And it turned out, I had friends over. I thought people were going to be over till midnight because we'd be waiting and watching what's going to happen to the votes. At 8 o'clock, the vote was over. Like, oh, my friends are like, is it over yet? I'm like, yeah, you don't have to come. We already have a winner. I'm like, that was anticlimactic. But anyway, same idea here. We got it wrong. We assumed that it would be divided, but it wasn't. It was a pretty big landslide for Truman. And so what Truman does, his key second-term policy is the fair deal. His key second-term policy is the fair deal. His key second-term policy is the fair deal. And pretty much this is a continuation of what? The New Deal. It continued New Deal policies. Not all of them, but it continued certain New Deal policies. What do you think he might want to protect of the New Deal? Like, not the AAA or the CCC, none of that stuff anymore, but what are some of the programs that were created by the New Deal that you think the Democrats want to protect, that still exist today, for example? Huh? That wasn't created by the New Deal. Social Security. So he passes the new Social Security Act of 1950. He passes the new Social Security Act of 1950, which extends benefits to senior citizens. So pretty simple there. He just figures old people still deserve, pensions and retirements, and so he extends benefits to the elderly. In 1950. He also creates the Housing Act of 1949. He also creates the Housing Act of 1949. And what this does is it creates low-cost public housing. It creates low-cost public housing. And who is that going to benefit? The poor. Low-cost public housing. So again, if it's public housing, it's probably going to be cheap because is the government's going to keep rent low? Sure. So it's low-cost public housing. We actually do have public housing here in this city of La Puente. There is certain housing here, certain apartment buildings where you have to have a low income to live there. You can't just live there if you're making like $80,000. You have to live there if you can prove that you're low income, because the idea is it's supposed to help people have low rent so they can feed their families or whatever else. But low cost housing, public housing. And lastly, it increased the minimum wage. It fought to increase the minimum wage. Now, please be aware, folks, that even though this is the only thing we're talking about in Truman's second term, it doesn't mean that this is the only thing that he did in his second term. He also did the other, Cold War stuff. But in terms of domestic policy, this is what he fought for in his second term. Does that make sense? Like, if Obama's second term is primarily fighting on immigration, then likely in his second term, we'll be like, oh, and then in the second term, President Obama fought for immigration. It's like in his first term, people remember him for doing what? Like healthcare, right? So second term was immigration. In any case, folks, even though this is, again, the only thing we'll talk about in Truman, just remember, all those Cold War foreign policy things, all that Red Scare stuff that was happening, that carried on through his presidency, but in terms of his key legislation in the second term, it was just a fair deal. Now, luckily for you, the AP test will never ask you what was the difference between Truman's first term and second term. They'll never ask you that, between presidents, like what did they do the first time versus the second time. Just know in general, this is everything that Truman did. I only break it up this way just so you know that he was elected for a second term. Questions there? None? Okay. That is Truman. And we'll stop with Truman, and we'll continue Eisenhower thereafter.